The global coronavirus pandemic has affected the world. People around the world have different ideas of how this pandemic should be handled. Different ideologies believe that there are different problems being created by the pandemic, and they have different solutions to solve these problems. In this video, I am going to explore how three different ideologies, liberalism, conservatism, and socialism, understand the pandemic socially, politically, and economically, and how they plan to fix the problem in these sectors of society in our current global state. Socially, this pandemic is changing how people go about in their regular day-to-day life. We're being told to stay in our homes and stay away from others unless it is absolutely essential to prevent the spread of the virus to others in our communities. We cannot go and visit family, and we cannot go and visit friends. Many students are trying to adapt to new ways of learning remotely, and many people are either working from home, being essential workers, or being let go. Most people, while they do not enjoy the restriction of normal human movement, believe that the quarantine is necessary to keep others safe. There are others that feel that this quarantine is far too restrictive, and that the government should not have the power to make people change how they live. We are not allowed to engage in our normal recreational activities or other public gatherings. We can see from our class readings and global examples how the ideologies of liberalism, conservatism, and socialism react to the social changes of this pandemic. These drastic social changes occurring are viewed as necessary by the ideology of liberalism. In liberal writer John Stuart Mill's On Liberty, he writes about the responsibilities of man. In his writing, he emphasizes self-protection and that the only purpose for which power can be rightfully exercised over any member of a civilized community against his will is to prevent the harm of others. The liberal harm principle is why liberals believe that social distancing and the cancellation of group gatherings is necessary, because it protects ourselves as individuals and also prevents the harm of others. A liberal solution to these changes occurring currently would most likely be waiting until the curve is flattened and it is safe to go back and be in large groups and gatherings again. I believe that this response is adequate because more people will become sick and more will die if countries reopen too soon. The ideology of conservatism views the social changes as extremely restricting right now. Also, the ideology goes against the occurrence of radical social change. Conservatism values individualism and the reliance of the self. So, conservatives view this sudden social change of quarantine as unnecessary. We can see the pushback against this idea from American conservatives who are not following social distancing rules and protesting quarantine. They are doing these protests to fight against more than just social change, but I will elaborate on the other reason later. Socially, these protests are fighting for something Americans really value: freedom. American conservatives are arguing that their freedom is being compromised and that their rights are being infringed upon. William Sumner states in his reading under the section What Social Classes Owe to Each Other that the only things that the state owes to people is peace, order, and the guarantees of rights, and anything else is a fallacy or superstition. Conservatism's response to the social changes occurring during the pandemic would be to urge their representatives to reopen the country before cases stop increasing at an exponential rate, so that they can decide for themselves how to live through the pandemic on their own without government intervention. I do not believe that this is an adequate response because as some of the public gathering spaces open, like beaches in America, people do not seem to be keeping distance from one another, and they spread the virus to others more quickly than if the government basically told them to stay inside and stay away from each other and these spaces. Socialists would see the social distancing regulations as a good way to protect the safety of other people because they believe in cooperation and community. Also, revolutionary socialists can see this pandemic as an opportunity to take power from the bourgeoisie. But they may be upset that the members of the exploited working class are the ones being forced to work, and the working class is more likely to not have a choice in avoiding large gatherings, putting them at a greater risk for contracting the virus. Their response to the social changes caused by the pandemic would be advocating for workers' rights and bringing awareness to the conditions workers have to work through. I think that this is an adequate response because essential workers' situations may improve because of this. These three ideologies are also implementing and reacting to policy changes pertaining to this pandemic. Liberals look to provide financial support to citizens and businesses that have been affected by the coronavirus. Politically, liberals are pushing for stimulus money for citizens and the prevention of eviction of those who cannot afford their monthly rent payments. They want the government to help the citizens who need it. Also, liberals are fighting for remote elections to prevent further spread of the virus. Politically, conservatives are pushing for policies that reopen businesses and other parts of the country. They're doing this so that their constituents and peers can return to normal. They publicly support efforts to quickly find a vaccine so that life before COVID-19 can resume. They also want to start the economy up again and prevent more people from going on unemployment. Politically, socialists are asking for better treatment of workers during this pandemic. With many workers being forced to work in situations that have more possible exposure to the virus, they have started to strike. An example of this would be the Amazon workers who staged a walkout in Staten Island after the company failed to inform the workers of infected individuals in the warehouse. In this next section of the video, I will be discussing the economic problem solutions proposed by each ideology during this pandemic. Liberals look at the economic problems associated with this pandemic and believe that the solution is to help provide for the people within the country. They support and propose stimulus checks for citizens of the country so that they can survive during the quarantine. Conservatives believe that returning to normal is the solution for the economic problems that are happening currently. The protests that American conservatives are taking part in is also for business owners and workers who want to get back to work. Conservatives believe that the solution to the economic problems of the pandemic are for the government to reopen the country so that people have a choice to get back to work. Socialism sees the economic problems associated with the pandemic as an opportunity to showcase how important workers are to the economy. The constant fall of the market shows that the owners are not the value maker for companies, but instead the workers are what create value. Also, they can use the fact that many minimum wage workers are essential to push forward the idea that they deserve to be paid more because they are showing just how important and necessary their jobs are. Conclusion. These different ideologies have different ideas of how to solve the problems that this pandemic is creating, and also take advantage of them in the case of socialism. The pandemic itself may lead to new interpretations of the harm principle from the ideology of liberalism, in addition to the idea of workers' rights as leverage in an emergency in the ideology of socialism, and an expansion of writing similar to that of William, society therefore does not need any care or supervision Sumner, in the ideology of conservatism.